Dan and Amy and Trump in Israel today. I've been in Saudi Arabia over the weekend, and he gave a rather stirring address to Saudi and Arabian leaders. And, you know, as much as the D.C. press corps reported his moderating his tone, there were pointed moments in the speech where his position was unmistakable.
Still much work to be done. That means honestly confronting the crisis of Islamic extremism and the Islamicists and Islamic terror of all kinds. If you choose the path of terror, your life will be empty, your life will be brief, and your soul will be fully condemned. And political leaders must speak out to affirm the same idea. Heroes don't kill innocents, they save them.
And I like, too, that, I mean, he was very presidential. I thought he had our best interests at heart, but he reminded them, too, of how much we have suffered at the hands of Islamic terrorists.
Drive them out of your places of worship. Drive them out of your communities. Drive them out of your holy land. And drive them out of this earth.
And in one of the more most optimistic flourishes of his speech, he really spoke to the old guard in the room about the younger generations that are coming up, including the Deputy Crown Prince, who is much more liberal, small L, than his elders on matters of women's rights and religious freedom, tolerance. This was, I thought, really his best foray on the topic in terms of speaking directly to the people of Saudi Arabia, as well as throughout the Muslim world.
Some estimates hold that more than 95% of the victims of terrorism are themselves Muslim. We now face a humanitarian and security disaster in this region that is spreading across the planet. It is a tragedy of epic proportions. No description of the suffering and depravity can begin to capture its full measure. The true control of ISIS, if you look at what's happening, Al-Qaeda, Hezbollah, Hamas, and so many others, must be counted not only in the number of dead, it also must be counted in generations of vanished dreams. The Middle East is rich with natural beauty, vibrant cultures, and massive amounts of historic treasures. It should increasingly become one of the great global centers of commerce and opportunity. This region should not be a place from which refugees flee, but to which newcomers flock.
I mean, it was really a well-constructed speech, and it reminds us of the challenge we've noted with Trump from the outset, which is when he's got people that are steeped in the policy area on which he is going to speak that prepare remarks for him. He's very good.
Mm-hmm.
And
he's effective.
That's when he's Mr. Trump. When he goes off script into certain topics, particularly when it's of a quasi or very real personal nature, he becomes Dr. Jekyll. And we need to quell Dr. Jekyll and accentuate Mr. Trump, I think. But for more on this, we're pleased to be joined by Steve Cortes, who's a Fox News contributor and also the former head of Donald Trump's Hispanic Advisory Council during the presidential campaign. Steve, thanks for being with us.
Good morning, Dan, and thanks for having me.
So the president's trip to the Middle East amid all of the domestic controversy regarding the Comey firing and the special counsel appointed last week, square the circle for us on Trump and his handling of the Comey situation and Trump in the Middle East and his handling and kind of re-bonding with the Saudis that we saw over the weekend.
Sure. No, I do think there's a relation there of, I think at home, the primary mission is prosperity. I think the reason he was elected is that we've had a decade of slow growth that has been wonderful if you're part of the very top echelon of American economic society, if you're an owner of assets. It's been terrible for working Americans, in particular the kind of blue-collar people who voted for him in Midwestern states particularly and put him over the electoral edge. But we have to be prosperous at home to then be secure abroad. And I think that's the connection between the two. But to get to the crux of your question regarding Comey, I personally, and I don't think everybody sort of in the Trump team agrees with me, but I personally really welcome the special counsel because I'm utterly confident there was no collusion at any time between the campaign and any foreign entity. I believe that truth will come out eventually. And I also think that this gives the White House, and this has been my advice to my friends in the White House, I hope they pursue it, is this gives us a very legitimate reason to say we are no longer answering these absurd accusations about Russia, about Comey. That is now the job of Mueller, of the special counsel. We're going to put that aside, and let's get back to the bread and butter of why we were elected, which is economic prosperity. Let's get back to this tax plan, and let's get this through to Congress and get this country growing the way we need to again.
Well, but one challenge to that is this. Now you're going to have this issue hang over the White House for the next year, year and a half, 2 years,
Sure.
as this drags out and it goes wherever the special counsel wants to take it, however long he wants to take it. And that kind of leads Trump into a weaker position with respect to some recalcitrant GOP members of the House and the Senate in terms of pursuing his policy agenda and securing policy victories on health care and taxes and the like.
Right. No, again, I hear you on that point, but I guess what was the alternative? The alternative was to continue as we have been, which is just constant, anonymous, shadowy sources that the mainstream media digs up, most of whom, by the way, I doubt the veracity of, or at least I doubt the material nature of most of these leaks. The alternative is we just continue down that constant path of leak after leak, of accusation and denial and rebuttal. So no, it's not perfect. I wish there weren't an issue at all, of course. But I think given the choices, I'm actually happy, and I think the White House, if they message this correctly, can say that is, and particularly if there aren't leaks coming out of Mueller's organization. And he has an incredible reputation for integrity. So as long as his group isn't leaking, I think this story goes away for a while. Now that doesn't mean it's not a problem.
Well,
Cabled effectively.
Don't you think President Trump, if he's asked again, why did you fire James Comey, that he should just say, I'm not discussing it anymore. Let's have somebody else deal with it.
Yeah, I exactly do. And yes, I agree with you completely, Amy. And again, I think that we have, I don't want to say an excuse because it's legitimate, but we have legitimate reason now to say, look, we have said all along there's no collusion. We're fully confident that will be the final conclusion of the Mueller commission, or not commission, but counsel office, and that's up to them. Now let's get back to what really matters: taxes, health care, immigration. And, in spite of the mainstream media fixation with these absurd Russia accusations, the reality on the ground is actually really encouraging. There's incredible signs for the economy, both in the stock market and economic surveys and consumer confidence. The border is already being secured, mainly just through the words of the president, which is truly incredible. We have Gorsuch from the Supreme Court. So great things are happening. We've got to get the attention back on those things and taxes, which I think is the holy grail of the policy agenda of this administration.
Well, just sticking on special counsel and Comey for a minute, since Comey is going to testify before the Senate at some point, and Chaffetz is meeting with Comey today, apparently. Mueller and Comey go way back. In fact,
Right.
An excellent piece by Carl Cannon in the Orange County Register over the weekend reminds people that in Mueller's highest-profile case as FBI director, he and Comey worked together to botch the anthrax investigation that took the lives of 5 people and infected 17 others, shut down the U.S. Capitol and Washington's mail system back in 2001 by Richard Jeweling. Remember?
Yeah.
They got the wrong guy.
Wrong guy.
Right.
And when they finally got around to getting the right guy, that was a $5 million civil settlement later
From all
that
the
was
networks.
directed to the wrong guy, and the right guy committing suicide. So it leaves me a little bit concerned about, despite all the protestations about Mueller's integrity and so on and so forth, it leaves me a little bit concerned about this special counsel and where this goes.
Right. No, and listen, it's a good point. I mean, in theory, the special counsel idea does make me incredibly nervous, the fact that they have the power to go anywhere, right? And that they have also an open-ended checkbook. I mean, that bothers me, of course, right, that they can make this go. I think the Scooter Libby, by the way, was the worst violation of justice, and it lasted 4 years. It's absurd in a pretty simple open and shut matter. So, yeah, I agree. I don't like just handing the keys and saying, hey, drive the car anywhere you want as long as you want. That does worry me. But what doesn't worry me is, and I say this as somebody who was a veteran of the campaign, who knew all the top people in the campaign, I am fully confident no collusion. Now, listen, were there a couple unsavory contacts? It seems like, particularly regarding General Flynn, sure, it seems like it. It seems like he was a little greedy, perhaps made some decisions that were wrong. I mean, it's why he got fired very quickly. But in terms of the actual campaign and strategy in any way colluding with any foreign power, it just didn't happen. And I think that will be conclusively proven by Mueller, no matter what he wants to do regarding Comey's reputation.
So how do you think President Trump's going to handle this? Like Nixon or like President Ronald Reagan?
Right. Well, I mean, I hope like Reagan, but, when it comes to Reagan and Iran-Contra, I mean, there was a there.
Yeah.
When it comes to collusion with Russia, I'm fully confident, as the president has said repeatedly, that there is absolutely no collusion. So I guess neither would be my honest answer on that. And I want him to get back to focusing on the economy, particularly this tax plan. I think the special counsel appointment gives us the rationale. It effectively tables the issue, if we play it correctly, I think, tables the issue for months at least. And while, I don't love the uncertainty, of course, as long as the economy continues to accelerate, and it is, and we get taxes through, and then we really accelerate into 2018, I think people will actually kind of forget, well, who the heck is Mueller? Until he comes out with his final report.
There's reports out end of last week and over the weekend that there may be a bit of a Trump senior staff shakeup when he gets back from the Middle East, particularly with respect to his comm staff. What can you say to those reports?
I hear the same rumors that you're hearing and reading. A lot of those people are my friends, my good friends. So I don't want to comment honestly on what I think will or should happen. I am reasonably confident that there will be significant staff changes sooner than later, in several places in the White House. And look, while I think there's been great successes, as I talked about, there's also clearly been some serious stumbles. And I think that's also part of electing the first non-politician, non-general in history, the first sort of citizen president. While I think he's done a terrific job, clearly there have been some mess-ups, and some of that's on him, some of that's on the staff. So, some growing pains that I think they're going to sort out pretty quickly. But I also think, by the way, in terms of no growing pains, I mean, holy cow, has this guy with no diplomatic experience gone overseas, and so far, I mean, is hitting it out of the park. And I hope and believe will continue to, now that he's in Israel and then after that in Italy, but extremely impressed with what he did. And particularly, I know you were talking about his speech in Saudi Arabia. I think for an American president to speak to really just about the entire leadership of the Arab world in one room, and I think give them a perfectly balanced approach of, some admonition about you've got to get your house in order. You need to combat this in your countries, in your banking systems, in your schools. But at the same time saying, but we are also not going to be lecturers, and I think what he was saying by implication there is we're also not going to be nation builders. We're done with that. It hasn't worked for us. It hasn't made your world safer. So instead, we're going to have a strategic partnership to fight terror that makes sense for both sides. And so he, to me, showed that he was extremely ready to be president despite having no political experience. Okay,
future Press Secretary Steve Cortes.
Yeah,
don't forget us when you ascend to the White House court, the White House press room. And
would never forget you two, no matter where, no matter what podium I'm speaking at.
Very good. All
Maybe
right.
we could Skype in a question.
Fox News contributor. Yeah, right, exactly. Fox News contributor and former Donald Trump Hispanic Advisory Council head, Steve Cortes. Steve, thanks for joining us. Appreciate it.
Thank you both.
And he joined us on our turnkey.pro answer line.